our website, our school website. We are also on our YouTube channel. We are Facebook Live, and we are on Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network this morning. So hopefully, with all of those different outlets, we have the capacity to have a broad audience this morning. So welcome to our workshop. And just as a note before we get started, we are here obviously to hear the response and reopening plan from the superintendent, Mr. Davis, this morning. And as everything has been quite fluid in this situation, I just want to remind our board members and our faculty and the population that things change. And so today we're going to hear your proposal, and we're excited to hear what you have to propose to us, but it's also in the format of a workshop this morning. And the workshop is intended to have a discussion, ask questions, hear recommendations, so that you can go back and finalize a plan. And of course, I know with your communication skills, you have been very open and transparent as to what changes need to be made, and you will keep us updated when we have to make adjustments accordingly, because things change, right? Things change. And so I just also want to mention that we have 4 board members that are here in the auditorium today, but we also have 3 board members that are joining us virtually today. And so Ms. Stewart, Dr. Hahn, and Ms. Schamberger will be joining us virtually today, and Mr. Porter is going to let us know when they are when they would like an opportunity to speak. And so that we have that today as well. We appreciate everyone being here who can be here, and we appreciate the folks, the board members at home allowing us the space that we need to be social distance here. And as you can see, we are social distance in the auditorium today. Everyone is wearing a mask. I took mine off, but I am 6 feet away from everyone else, and so that gives me the opportunity to function without a mask on right now. And as well, Mr. Superintendent, if you're more comfortable taking that off while you speak, you are at least 6 feet away from the next person, so that might make it a little more comfortable for your presentation today. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. To the chair, thank you for the opportunity for me and my team to present our reopening plan. Well, you said it beautifully in the sense that this is an opportunity for us to talk about potential models, about how we will return in August, and do that in a way that protects every one of our learners, but at the same time protects the working conditions of our employees. For board members who are virtually, please check your emails. You should have a communication from Mr. McCauley, and that will be an uploaded PowerPoint presentation that I will review this morning, along with another document that outlines every model that we will present. And I want the community to echo what Chair Snively has said. This is an opportunity for us to start and move the conversation, and one that will show multiple facets and models that has been demonstrated and worked through with care. Last week, I had the opportunity to sit and be active participant in a kitchen table conversation. And in that conversation, I want our community and our teachers to know that I had to be very global, because I thought it would be very unprofessional to speak about the plan before presenting it to the school board members. And that's just being graceful in the work. So today we'll take a deeper dive to address, potential issues in the current state, not only where we are from a local perspective, but where we are from a state perspective as well. And what does it look like as we seek to return on August 10th? I'm so proud of the team members for actively moving and helping create, 3 models that we will present today. They worked hard, diligently. They've been in constant conversations with personnel, with staff members, had conversations with the health department, looped in leaders, school-based leaders, and had some more conversations this morning. And we've had robust conversations with Stephanie and Rob with CTA. and to make certain that we are getting this right. And we want to make certain that we show and demonstrate care for every one of our employees instructionally and support professionals as well, so they have an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish when we come back. So overall, this entire plan presented today is all about safety and the well-being of our learners at the same time with our employees today. If we can have the PowerPoint put up, and we'll rock and roll. So overall today, we want to talk about the 2021 reopening plan, look at, Hillsborough Virtual School, how are we going to reimagine what that looks like in Hillsborough County, and at the same time talk about the GEARS Act and ESSER grant update to look at potential funding models that will be coming to Hillsborough County so that we can use. Yes, sir. Sorry. Okay, you want to keep going? Okay.
Do the board members that are not here have a copy of this?
They should.
Not yet. We don't have it yet.
Okay, so let's wait until they, okay. Can you see the PowerPoint that is being displayed?
Yes.
Okay, all right. We're just not able to see it on our monitors yet, so I just want to make sure that you can see it, though, if you don't have a hard copy. Thank you.
So Ms. Stewart, please continue to check. Mr. McCauley is pushing.
I will. Don't. I would say don't wait on us.
Okay.
We'll
right.
see it, but we can see what's on the screen.
All right. Yes, ma'am. All right. Here we go. So school reopening plan. What we want to do today is talk about the review of the status of COVID-19. Where is that related to Hillsborough County? Look at Florida executive orders and local declarations, and then review the 3 models considered for reopening within Hillsborough County public schools, and review key elements of our reopening the design, and at the same time talk about next steps as an organization. What does that mean for us in order to make certain that we are ready and prepared to transition as we start to August 10th? Overall, looking at the timeline, it's been really rapid. Coming on the job a couple of days and being able to drive the work in a pandemic has been, really unique and an exciting opportunity to learn. But if you look at this timeline, this started around March the 13th. We were directed to shut down every one of our learning centers, every one of our schools, in order, due to the fact that the pandemic was presented to us within Hillsborough County. On March 14th, the next day, we immediately started to conduct deep cleans in every one of our facilities to be able to continue to make certain that we had safety and security and the welfare of our employees and our students. And then looking at March 23rd through 27th, that was a week coming back off of spring break. We used it for a Setup to Success week. And that was a week where our teachers just continued to be heroes in our work every single day, and our principals as well, to be able to upload, to have touch points with children, to get them set up for success, to interact with a new way of learning that never have been exposed in education throughout this nation and through the state of Florida. Therefore, we started the e-learning process on March the 30th, which which continued through the last day of school on May 29th. I will say during that time frame, we learned a lot. We learned what worked, what didn't, what we can do differently. And I can tell this community is that everything that we did, we had to write the playbook. I say it all the time, to define what instruction looked like, how we delivered, what supports would be extended for students who need additional services, and what we were trying to accomplish related to making certain that our children had the necessary essentials every single day, not only from an instructional standpoint, but what were we going to do to provide ongoing mental health services, and what were we going to do to make certain that every one of our students had the necessary nutrition to be successful. And in this time, we've served so many families for mental health, but we also served over 5.5 million meals to our learners, which is a significant amount of connectivity every single day. And we've given over 40,000, close to 40,000 laptops as well, and thousands of Wi-Fi devices. And then we looked into the staircase approach. When you look at the dimmer approach from the governor's office, it released and announced that educational platforms would need to transition to open up and offer VPK. And so we've launched that initiative in the last week. But then on June 15th, we allowed our athletics and outside athletics and extracurricular activities to come back in a controlled manner to be able to begin the initiation of our return. And then on June 22nd, our host programs in VPK started. As you know, VPK went down from 300 hours to 200 hours as an executive order. and that we started that this week. And of the host numbers, we had 352 applicants, and to date we had 111 that showed up yesterday. We'll make those touch points and see where the others are, and if we need to, we'll open it up to some of our community in need. And then all this is preparation to be prepared for August 10th's return. So when you look at, why reopening is so important, no matter where I go, whether it's to the grocery store, whether it's, the workout facility, where I'm getting gas or walking in the community, everyone wants to know what the reopening plan may be. And I want everyone who is watching, everyone here today, to know that this is going to be a fluid decision. Today, while we will present and work through models, know that we will not select one particular model because we are at a different place every single day. If you look around this room and look around the city of Tampa, 5 days ago, no one would be able to predict that we would have to wear masks. And it's all because of the trajectory of the spike. And we want to make certain that we are fluid with the current times that we are interacting within Hillsborough County and the city limits of Tampa. But at the same time, we will be mindful of the governor's phase approach, and we will make local decisions that act in the best interests of our student body and the employees that we serve every single day. But overall, why is reopening so important? Because one, it's educationally, it's important to make certain we know the best way to connect with our learners is face-to-face engagement, and that education is the foundation of all. And the second tier is the economic impact. And from an educational perspective, research continues to show, and we will feel this as well as we return, that students who are impacted the most are students who are in low-income, marginal students who have not been exposed to instruction every single day. Students who are one or more years behind instructionally, intellectually, they will be hindered the most by the separation of our work. And at the same time, we know that it's real. The subsets and subgroups of achievement gaps will continue to grow if we are not able to return in a traditional fashion to be able to connect with our children every single day. But economically, 2/3 of our parents, have say that closures have hurt their ability to perform their jobs. And we know that low-wage workers, they will not be able to go to work because they will have to find ways to keep their children, provide child care for their children. And lastly, we know that self-isolation has a psychological major impact of where we are. So it's truly important that we have a reopening plan that is intentional and one that shows the overall impact. So we'll look at COVID cases in Hillsborough County. To date, we have over 5,900 cases confirmed. And this is just a model that shows that, where the age groups are in the hundreds of our constituents that are impacted. And to give you a pressing note, around May 30th, in the state of Florida, we were increasing the rates around 1,200 new cases, a day. I mean, in a time frame from May 30th was 1,200 cases were confirmed related to an increase in spike. From May 30th through June the 20th, we've seen an increase of over close to 4,000 new cases of COVID in a short period of time. And we have to be mindful of what's going on with our community and make sound decisions. So what does it look like? As you know, we did a survey to reopen. In that survey, you've seen this information. It's very clear that 62,000 parents responded. Of the 62,000 parents, we asked them their comfortability to return, and close to 53% were comfortable in returning back to Hillsborough County schools. But they were also a large number of individuals that were not prepared for the comfortability. And then we see in the same way with staff. And then when they look at the ridership of, while we have, close to 100,000 of our students that transition every single day with our buses, only 45% of our students who are eligible for transportation said that they would use our transportational system to get our children to schools. And then openly, we had an increased number of students that truly enjoyed the e-learning process and then would transition to the virtual world, which we are going to stand and be prepared to accept them. So the reopening models, what we've done is we created 3 models, Model A, Model B, and Model C. And we linked each of these models to a low, mild spread, to a moderate spread, and a substantial spread. And if you look at the phases, those are just kind of indicators and quantifiers related to what the governor's initiative phase model was. and to make certain that there's a measurable related to where we are and what model we select as an organization, knowing that this will be fluid. But if you look at Model A will be traditional. It'll be a model that allows us to come back to school as normal and bring normalcy back to the community, to our community. Model B would be a hybrid rotational model with that incorporates with a 10-day period that focuses on reducing class size, reducing an increase in structured movement, and reducing the number of students on our buses. And then Model C is the e-learning process, which we have lived this entire time during the fourth quarter of our end of the 2019-2020 school year. As relates to these models, we want to make certain that we look at how does that overall instructionally impact our schools. Model A is traditional. Schools will be open. In addition, Model B, schools will be open in a modified blended manner that reduces the number of students in their capacity. And Model C, e-learning, schools will be shut down. And the only way we get to Model C is by the governor's office or the Florida Department of Education sending a strong recommendation or directive for us to close due to the status of COVID or any other element within the organization. So there's a breakdown of what the educational delivery models will be for Hillsborough, could potentially be for Hillsborough County. Model, in every one of these models, we want to be very clear that Hillsborough Virtual is going to be and will be available for every one of our students. We are going to reimagine the way we do work with Hillsborough Virtual as we lose a significant number of students to Florida Virtual. So we're going to rebrand and relaunch. And at the same time, in these models, not only will Hillsborough Virtual be prepared and ready, e-learning will be available as well. And I want our community to understand, for parents who are watching and teachers who are watching, we have learned a lot from our past experience of the last 9 weeks. E-learning will be significantly improved due to understanding of what worked, what didn't, and what we can do better. And through the e-learning process, while our teachers did a tremendous job, and so did our school-based leaders, we did a really nice job assigning work to our students. The e-learning process, as we know it and as we transition in these models, will be very comprehensive about how we engage. And we've still got to work through CTE with Stephanie's been a great partner, and Rob as well, to define how that process looks, to be able to conduct flip videos, to be able to have live instruction during the e-learning process if a parent chooses that model, that option within every one of these models. Overall, these models were developed to give our parents choice of what they feel most comfortable. And one thing we learned through our parent survey and through the open-ended questions, our parents want choice in their election and selection for how their child will be educated. No different than we want choice for the pathway and program and initiatives that we select for our children to go to, what school. Hence, we have robust programs. The same in this model as we seek delivery. So overall, in Model A, traditional model, we will offer brick and mortar, face-to-face instructional for any learner and any educator who wishes and elects to return. We want to make certain that this is business as usual related to our return status. If we're in the right state and phase of our state and locally, in this model, we'll also create e-learning processes where e-learning will be about students who really thrive during the e-learning side. A parent can elect and stay. So, example, if I attend Alonzo High School, Plant High School, Durant High School, you name it, and I want to stay connected to that particular school, then I can select the e-learning process, and then we will have and select a criteria for teachers to be able to connect with the e-learning process, and they'll be dedicated to the e-learning process to be able to extend high quality lessons every single day. And the beauty about that is a learner continues to stay connected to their neighborhood and home school. And then we will continue to have in this model, we will have Hillsborough Virtual School for those who just truly love, the virtual, independent, pace, as an educational option. As we transition to Model B, we've heard through the survey, we've heard through communications to the superintendent, to board members, and to our staff. If there's we understand the importance of bringing children back to face, but if we cannot do it in a manner that supports social distancing, that also allows us to have controlled structured movements, we've got to have another plan. And if we get to a point where we see that, And we ever get to a point where we're shut down as an organization and we can phase out of a shutdown and we're transitioning back to somewhat a normal, we've got to have a different option. And option B brings a blended model. In that blended model, what it does is it allows us to have, if you're looking at a 10-day period, students will go to attend brick and mortar schools for 4 of the 10 days. 6 days will be e-learning. So it will be a blended model. And the reason the blended model is, it can be attractive, and it'll be very, we're going to work through the mechanics of it with us and CTA and HR. But the most attractive part about this is that we get a chance to have touch points with children, and we can focus on eliminating and reducing the volume of traffic in our common areas, the volume of traffic in our classrooms. We will cut class sizes in half to be able to make certain that we are working through social distancing. We can have 6 feet apart in our classrooms, and that we can truly implement that from a bus perspective as well. The big thing about this is that if you see it, if you have a teacher perspective, a teacher will touch and be able to teach students 8 of the 10 days, within our class to have face-to-face instruction. And in 2 of the days, we will provide an opportunity for teachers to have virtual planning, to grade, to connect, to upload lessons, to give them the 48 hours they need. And we know that sometimes that's never enough, but give them additional time they need to upload information and interact through EDSP or Canvas, which initiative that we elect to be most important. And in this blended model, which we will also offer e-learning, that will still be an option in Hillsborough Virtual. If we have to transition to Model C in the shutdown, we will have Hillsborough Virtual School, and e-learning will be the only 2 options under that umbrella. As it relates to the implementation strategy, I just spoke about it. Option A is all about traditional setting, returning in a brick and mortar setting. Will be optional for parents to select the e-learning process, and we will work with school-based leaders to identify the necessary allocations that they will need to serve children, to be able to make certain that we have appropriate ratios from teachers to students related to the e-learning process. And we're going to have to embed and provide ongoing professional development and technology to make certain that this is not just assigning work, but more of using it from a virtual world, using it for uploading, whether it's Zoom, whether it's some type of live digital platform, so that there's an opportunity. And in the e-learning process, it'll be an opportunity for us to define working hours of teachers so that they can connect with children every single day, ask questions, provide intensive support, and to be able to help our learners be successful. And then Hillsborough Virtual, as I said. Model B, like I said, is a combination of face-to-face. It reduces the number of students on our campus, reduces the number of students in our classroom, reduces the number of students on our buses, and we've broken up into alternative cohorts. And for parents who are asking, we may have siblings that go to our schools. Right now we're in the planning process. It will most likely be alpha, so that if you have a few learners going to the same school, elementary school, middle school, or high school, then they'll be on the same schedule, so you're not trying to chase childcare in that model, in that there's a coordinated effort. I know that Model B may bring angst related to a blended model to find childcare, but in order for us to gain accessibility to students, and we know the power of being in front of students every day, there's no substitute for a high quality teacher in front of children to be able to help them be successful every single day. We will seek to be partners with our community members to find ongoing processes. And the big thing about B, if we're in a current state, that if we go into a phase 1 to the governors, or phase 2, in the top of low side of phase 2, that shuts down potentially businesses and communities, then for the most part we know that the bulk of our employees in our community will be working virtually as well. And I know that becomes somewhat difficult to do, and thank you for what you've done during this process. And then Model C, all schools will be closed. When looking at, specialized instruction, some of the questions continue to be asked. What about students with English language learners? What about students with disabilities? How are we going to continue services? Model A continues our services as normal. We continue to provide ongoing services that outline the 504 IEPs and whatever services needed for students with ELL, provided with individual support plans. But Model B will look a little bit different as we look at driving the work from IEPs, 504 plans, and design instruction-related services through virtual teletherapies, due to rotating schedules, and we'll have ongoing services that may be provided virtually through speech, language, occupational, and physical therapy, and small group individual social skills interaction and instruction to make sure we're connected with our learners, and ELL supports will be provided, and we will leverage interpreters, paraprofessionals, support professionals to be able to connect the same way we did in e-learning. We know we've got to intensify those efforts, but I know we'll continue to work in small groups after we get direction today, with small groups of directors and supervisors and teachers and principals related to how we continue to grow and to better serve children of specialized needs in order to make certain that they are going to be successful every single day in our processes. And that will transition to the e-learning side the same way that we did it when related to the last 9 weeks. So extracurricular activities in the model. Model A will be as normal, practices as normal, but we will continue to be mindful of interactions, mindful of spacing, and mindful of the number of students they're in cohorts through practices or outside for extracurricular activities or inside as well. And then all facility use agreements will continue to move forward with continued guidelines. And then, but Model B in the hybrid model, we will make sure we had modified participations and taken in effect Department of Education, Department of Health, CDC guidelines, and also looking at the Florida High School Association as well, to provide us guidance, so we are in a controlled participation elements in Model B. And then we will be very strenuous about who in limited access to our facilities openly. While we want our community to be actively engaged and use our facilities at all times, we want to make certain that we limit that for exposure to and protection of our employees or our students as well, and that there are going to be potential charges for disinfectant cleaning. And while we are prepared to clean every one of our facilities, we've got to make certain that that's going to be inclusive in that model. And if we go to Plan C related to extracurriculars, that will be school will be closed related to all of the public. So health protocols, what does it look like on our return in each one of these and each one of these models? And there's going to be a number, and this is just a start of the conversation. So, Model A, if we come back, brick and mortar, in traditional setting, we're going to have, health screening, self-checks for staff. We will work with the health department to create criteria of what, to guide our staff about how to do self-checks at home, how they, about what they feel about taking their own temperature at home, to make certain that they are physically and ready to come back to be able to educate our children. But visitors, we're going to do health screening and temperature checks for any visitor that's to control and minimize our visitor accessibility to any one of our students. And then students, we're going to do health screening, self-checks at home. We'll create questionnaires, FAQs to send to our parents and to our caregivers, so they know, and to continue to do verbal checks with our students and physical checks every single day prior to them coming to school, so they can make certain that they are ready and prepared to transition. And we'll do a launch with our communication. Public service announcement that if you're sick or you have a fever or you have symptoms, we encourage you to stay home, and we will work with you diligently about providing any instructional content that you miss, and continue to work with you on the attendance side of it once we define documentation that may be needed. Model B will be, once again, we will have staff will be self-checks, but we will intensify it by having temperature checks at every one of our facilities. Visitors, we will limit the visitors for accessibility. If they have to be there and there's major organizational impact, they will be approved to come. But if it doesn't impact children, to be able to help them intellectually, socially, emotionally, or create and address structural needs through vendors, then we're going to be very stringent about who has accessibility to our facilities. And then students, once again, will have screening for self-checks with questionnaires. We encourage heightened sense of symptom surveillance to make certain that we have that verbal touch of, whether our students are, if they physically don't look well, and then have independent private conversations with that learner to be able to direct them to our nurse for additional screenings if need be, and continue our campaign. And then C will be closed, not applicable. So overall health protocols, one thing we do, the question is Addison, Mr. Davis, what happens if we have a staff member or student that may be, that have tested positive to the COVID? What are we going to do? Right now, we're going to remove that individual from the classroom setting and place them in an isolated space. If it's an employee, and we will usually they'll inform us that they may have potential symptoms. They won't come in, so they will no longer. We'll help them, connect them with their individual provider in the health department to seek any type of immediate assessments, so they can return with documentation. But for a student, we're going to remove them immediately. We're going to put them in an isolated place, and we'll coordinate that with every one of our schools. It's a safe place. We'll have our school nurses complete a health assessment, determine what next steps may be for that particular learner. If that student, we'll ask a parent to come pick them up immediately for that option. We'll provide guidance about sheet for follow-up and medical providers. We'll connect with the Department of Education for tracking purposes. But know this, and the question is, Mr. Davis, will we shut all schools down if we have a case? The answer to that is no. We will take each case by case. We'll look at each individual situation by case basis, and we'll determine what action needs to take place. We will never shut down the school district again at scale unless it's provided by direction from the governor's office and the Florida Department of Education within that. So, but there's in particular exposures, we will look at the actual layout of the facility and determine, is it just particular classroom? Is it a particular wing? Is it the gymnasium? Is it the cafeteria? And determine if we can shut down that particular point of exposure and continue the work. For the most part, if it's multiple places within a school, we may have to shut down that particular school, and I believe it's for 48 hours. And that 48 hours will allow us to do 24 hours to turn off the AC, to allow all of the dust particles to transition down to the ground, to the floor, so that we can have our intensive team go in with our safety and security, blitz that school, hit it with a thermofog, do a deep clean to be able to return the normalcy at that particular school. And then that will be our rapid response team ready to go to be able to get back to normalcy as soon as we can. But that's going to be a case by case, school by school basis. But we do everything we can to protect it. The other question is, what may happen physically from our saints. We are going to do deep cleans daily between touch points of children, which I'll explain a little bit on our buses and within our organization as well. As it relates to our employees, if any of our employees or our students that have been tested positive, they will go through the normal CDC protocols and through the health department guidelines, and they will have to self-quarantine prior to their return, safely return, and bring documentation that we are prepared to help them transition in a successful manner. Excuse me. So what does that look like from attendance model for our children? And for the one thing we want to say is we want to be graceful and help our students every single day. So attendance model, same attendance model, brick and mortar, be 5 consecutive days face to face. Everyone's expected to be there every single day. We know that students may have doctor's appointments and may not feel ill, so just make sure that we follow the protocol by outlining our code of student conduct and student handbook. And then if they're on e-learning processes, they got to make certain they log on every single day to have connectivity with your lessons and with your teachers. And from the virtual world, that's your independent learning and follow the expectation from virtual school. Modified B, we want to make certain that if we had a blended model of face-to-face and virtual learning, we have physical attendance expected to be face-to-face on the days that are assigned for our learners. Daily login will be required for all of our online e-learning platforms. In the Group A and Group B, a modified schedule will show the number of days that you will 4 consecutive days that you'll be in school, and then the 6 days you'll be on e-learning, and that will flip on that process. But overall, we'll make certain that we are here to provide ongoing supports and to make certain that we work with every one of our parents and our students based on the attendance policy. And then, C will be continuing to close, but attendance will be mandated to log in daily, and weekly attendance for C will update that. Implementing social distancing, with Model A, with coming back for parents that elect to come back if we're in that phase, we will do everything we can to practice it. To practice social distancing will be very complex and difficult with the class sizes at 18 and class sizes at 25, depending on the grade band. With that said, the good thing is we'll have e-learning and virtual as options and choice for parents. So that will help with the class size eliminations and reduce it. But we'll have controlled movement where possible. Whether it's a little easier to control. Can have controlled movements in the elementary module, especially in the primary where they may be in a standalone. We know the elementary, some of our teachers are departmentalized, and the question asks, are we going to make teachers move or are we going to make students move? In theory, it looks best if we can have teachers move, but from a practitioner standpoint, it's very difficult because our teachers do so much great work in their classrooms. Their classrooms are not just, they're not empty. When you walk in, they're thriving. Our teachers put so much time in their classrooms so the walls can be and the spaces can be interactive based on their learning content that they have every single day. So in that process, we're going to work to control movements, structured movements within every one of our common areas, time structure movements within our classrooms, going to the restrooms, going to the media center, going to the gymnasium, going to our lunch rooms, how they interact, what path they take. We will make sure we have an aggressive communication plans that have signs and locations and imageries on the floor that shows where individuals can step and stand. And at the same time, we're going to limit any mass gatherings. We will not have we used to have a significant number of assemblies, pep rallies. Those will be limited within our school district. We will work with our principals and our teachers to define how that looks. And then field trips will be very limited, and because we don't want to have additional exposure as well. And then we will continue to teach COVID-19 hygiene to every one of our students. If we transition to 50% model where 50% of attendance will be in place, we will make social distancing will be really evident in this platform, and this is all to protect the learner and our employees as well. Continue to control movement, and we have an increased COVID-19 hygiene, increased number of hand wash, increased number of how to use Lysol wipes within our facility, and then Model C will not be applicable. Personal protective, one thing we're going to do is, as I said it last week, we have purchased masks for every one of our employees. We are going to encourage them. We can't mandate them. We're going to encourage them. We're going to encourage them to use it. It's very difficult in education, especially when you're interacting with children, especially at the primary level. We're looking at phonemic awareness, sounds, to be able to, for VPK, yesterday they were trying to live it. Very difficult to hear pronunciations. Very difficult to interact with children in the learning processes through reading. But related to PPE, we will have staff. We provide staff with masks. And in addition, we're going to, we gave a number last week that would be close to between $6.8 and $9 million to provide everyday PPE for every one of our students that are not reusable, because we have 220,000 students. And the reason that we went with that model because we don't know the inequities within our community. But what we are going to do is provide students with 3 reusable masks, and that will reduce the cost significantly within our school district. And we're going to continue to encourage and recommend masks and social distancing within our school district, and to be able to continue to educate our children. One thing we want to give hats off to Chief Newman's work with FEMA, and FEMA is going to send over close to 400,000 masks for our employees for us to use, and that's and we are the first school district, and FEMA's doing that to just greater support the educational platform, and we are the first district to ask for them to provide additional masks for every one of our learners. So we put in an ask for over 1 million masks for our students. We do believe there's a great chance that will happen, and that will give our students 5 masks each on top of the 3 that we have. And that will be, a quick win to show and demonstrate our continued care. So thank you, Chief Newman. But if we transition to Model B, once again, it stays the same, related to our work and the related to masks that we will provide and continue to be a recommendation. And Model C will not be applicable. Looking at our facility sanitation, we will continue to increase in Model A frequency of touch points in our services. We will have cleaning in our hallways, common areas, classrooms, you name our school buses. We will continue to have cleans on an ongoing, consistent basis daily. nightly disinfectant in the common areas as well. And we'll have increased installation of hand sanitizers and wipes along the way. And we're going to continue to work with CTA, with Ms. Stephanie and Rob, to define and help to coach teachers how to coach children to take ownership in wiping down their facilities. We will provide the necessary wipes to our classrooms so that students can have ownership before they leave the classroom. They'll be given a wipe to wipe down any equipment that they've interacted with, any desks they've interacted with, to make certain that we have that protective manner, and we'll continue to monitor that. And B will be the same implementation. The only thing will be B will be a little bit different. After we have 4 days of students, because that model has a blended model, we'll do a deep, intensive clean of the entire school to reopen it for the next phase of our learners that will come in. And on a 4-day cycle, we'll continue to have that deep clean, and schools will be thoroughly cleaned if we had to go to a C. And transportation, how does that look for transportation? Regular seating will on the buses for Model A. We will continue to provide PPE for any learner that wants to have it on every one of our buses. There's around close to 100,000 students that ride our buses daily. So we will have PPE readily available for them on Model A, B. And we will practice social distancing where we can in this model, and drivers will continue to work with our bargaining units to make sure that we provide the necessary wipes, professional development about how we can have touch point wipe downs of our seats, and handrails to be able to help better to protect our runs during the day and during the evenings, in the mornings as well. And Model B will be continue to reduce seating, increase space on our buses. This is where social distancing will be impacted in a positive manner. And we'll be able to leverage the number of seats that we have available, and we'll continue to recommend social distancing and provide masks ongoing and touch points once again. And then food and nutrition. The biggest thing in Model A will be continued brick and mortar classroom. Brick and mortar lunch facilities will be open. Healthy Express does a really nice job, and hats off to the work that they've done during this entire fourth quarter, 9 weeks. They have been magnificent in their work, and I'm so thankful to interact with them and be a partner in that work and work alongside them during this present time. But we'll increase the seats, social distancing where we can. Once again, we'll purchase coordinated efforts of where children may be able to stand, especially in the elementary, primary, intermediate opportunity, and continue to recommend masks during lunchrooms. Model B we will be able to have coordinated seating that will be separated due to the 50% of our student body. And we will have modified programs on campuses that utilize food distribution the same way. While we'll have half our learners in schools, half our learners will be at home. We will have a blended model of grab and go opportunities that we will implement at the school level, and then also doing touch points for parents or constituents. But one thing we're going to do, when a learner leaves on their 4th day, and we're going to give them we'll try to give them a week's worth of food that day when they leave, or we will have a blended model where they can come pick it up. We'll continue to survey our parents to figure out what's best for them. And then Model C, the grab and go, will continue to be a part of that process. Communications. This is all about communications. It's about continuing to update our constituents, being out in front to communicate the plan and the model that we select, and then make sure they truly understand that they have choices in this process, and we stand ready to connect with them and provide ongoing supports along the way to the learners. And this will, every one of our plans will be very detailed about how we use parent links, phone calls, websites, social media, being able to look at creating information videos, signage, and posting Hillsborough Virtual options and messaging in both English and Spanish in every one of our models, and just being very articulate and infographics about what we offer and how we will continue to deliver services every single day. And then and that will be a progressive or from Model A all the way through Model C. And we will work with local news outlets, media outlets to be our platforms. They do a beautiful job of connecting and telling our stories and defining our action plans, daily. So we'll continue to be in front to communicate and articulate what our plans will be, and then know that these plans have to be and should be very fluid along the way. And we thank our parents, we thank our teachers, we thank our the school board and our school-based and district personnel for being flexible in this work. We must be flexible and through our interactions. And then, so what happens now? What is our next steps? A is to, right now is to get feedback from the board to figure out how we morph, refine, and redevelop and rethink, the kind of the strategies that we have presented today. We also have to put out a parent survey. This is phase 2 of the parent survey. We've got to define, if we transition to Model A, what a parent will select for their child. Will they select staying in brick and mortar, return in brick and mortar schools? Will they select the e-learning process at their school? Or will they select the Hillsborough Virtual side of it as well? And we're going to launch that parent survey at latest at July 1st. I've learned along the way I give a date, and it may take a day or two, so I'm going to say at the latest, July the 1st. And then that's going to be and try to get that information back at the latest by July 10th. And this is going to be a very explicit survey to every one of our parents. And we'll do it through media platforms. We'll do it, where it's tailored to every one of our students. So they'll have to give student name, student ID, grade level, and what option they will select. And that's going to allow us as a school district to define our staff allocation models. What will our models look like so that we are prepared to make certain that we have sufficient number of teachers for brick and mortar, e-learning, blended learning, or Hillsborough Virtual to be able to address the choices that our parents may select. We stand ready. We'll continue to work with our staff to make that happen. So, and then we'll also probably send an information out, the intent to return. We may have some employees that openly say that, if we transition to brick and mortar, that they may elect to, they may elect or aspire to go to virtual and to e-learning. And we have to build that criteria to figure out through HR and CTA what that looks like to have defined, because I think we may have a number of teachers. We only have a certain number of slots to go. A number of teachers who may elect to do that, but we have a lot of teachers that are ready to get in front of children every single day. And then we will define that process, transfer staff processes, and then work with principals to identify school-based e-learners, teachers, based on quantified numbers, based on content level, based on grade band. And then we've got to and will, in the first week of July, launch an equity diversity task force to reopen. And we can't just reopen. If we think we can just reopen and have children come back and not address what's going on with our nation, that can't happen. We have to stand prepared to educate our children, to understand, and celebrate rich diversity. We have to to understand and continue to train our teachers to remove implicit bias, to be able to be culturally sensitive, and for us to show how we will continue to interact in a positive manner every single day. And then we will identify social-emotional priorities, the mental health and the traumatic drama, traumatic influence that COVID has had on our learners. We have got to be prepared, and also the state of our nation currently, we've got to be prepared. And what does our social-emotional platform look like? What is it going to be from a curriculum side? Are we going to purchase 7 mindsets? And that's just another initiative that we can do to help and carry the work to be able to address multifaceted issues. Before we transition to our release it back to the board, we're going to Hillsborough Virtual. We're going to redefine and reimagine Hillsborough Virtual. To give you some context, I want our community and to know that Hillsborough Virtual and e-learning is very different in this work. Hillsborough Virtual is flipped classroom where all content is front-loaded for students, and it is work at the students' own pace to be through the semester to be successful. It's about weekly targets that they have to hit so students do not fall behind educationally. It's about parents, being learning coaches along the way, and then all content and curriculum are delivered in an electronic manner. What is e-learning? And I said it before, we're going to be better at e-learning. It's just lessons learned. E-learning is teaching, method created partly, out of necessity and choice in this manner. It's work generally assigned with daily or weekly by a classroom teacher that will use their curriculum design in their classroom. Parents will have this option to select if it wants to be online or paper and pencil. And then we'll work to define how this looks, whether it's uploading module videos, whether it's doing teaching live for our students. We will define that in the coming weeks to be able to make sure we articulate that to our community and to our staff. Look at historically, in Hillsborough, virtual school we've had in the last couple of years, at a high 363 students last year, 284 out of 220,000. That number needs to grow. Right now, with us, pressing the reset button on virtual in the current state, we're on pace to increase over 300% because right now we have over close to 800 applicants because we've made it a priority. The window closes for Hillsborough Virtual on July 24th, and we're about to flood with a marketing campaign to be able to compete with local providers in Florida Virtual. As you look at it, why is this so important? We have 8,000 of our students that have completed courses through Hillsborough Virtual, and if you look at Florida Virtual, we have our students 50. They have Hillsborough County students have they have completed 53,000 courses in Florida Virtual. We are losing $13 million through this process. So looking at that's $13 million going out. That's resources for our children. That's resources for our students. And we have got to get a chance where we compete and bring our learners back to this organization because Hillsborough Virtual teachers do a wonderful job every single day, and Matt Huff looks forward to driving it. And then gear. We have some money coming our way related to this work, and we have 2 pots of money that's going to come to our school district. So let's look at what the first one is the gear grant. This is the Educational Emergency Relief funding. This is all linked about, this is going to be around $5 million. It's linked to FTE that's given money to us and charter schools as well. And private schools are incorporated into this. So charter, private, and along with traditional brick and mortar district managed schools. This is all about summer recovery related to, how are we going to address the academic divide. Related to what COVID. This is all about K-3 students who are at risk for retention, and looking at third grade students with reading deficiencies, and fourth and fifth grade students who are level 1 or 2 on the FSA, and then looking at servicing our lowest 300 schools along the way. This money has to be implemented and used from June the 1st through August the 31st. So this is going to happen really fast for Hillsborough County and for every school district in the state. So what does that mean? So we get $5 million that's going to be coming to our school district. I'm going to say around $1 million is going to go to charter schools along with private institutions, and we'll be left with $4 million. And this is going to be, it's required to have 80 hours of literacy instructional time in person. And it's about requirement to be able to define, to bring teachers who are highly effective and effective as outlined by the state VAM, and promote attendance by the way of transportation, and devise we have to devise a communication plan and establish progress monitoring during this time frame. So Hillsborough Rise, this is remediation and intervention summer extension program. We will rise to be able to address this initiative, to be able to bring back students in need. This is going to be selectively targeted for the Transformation Network schools, 29 of our schools. And this Rise program will start July the 13th and transition to July 30th. And it's going to be 6 hour 45-minute days. And the focus will be on really literacy to help our students be successful. Our goal overall is to recruit teachers who are reading endorsed, to bring them who aspire to come back and hit that criteria to teach children, and to incentivize participation with their hourly rate as well. And then we will make certain that class size, and Mr. Connor, I'm going to cue you up here, class size is around 10 to 12. And Mr. Connor, how many teachers and students are we going to target?
Through the chair, we're looking to target about 80 students per school in 25 of our elementary schools in the Transformation Network, with about a 10-to-1 ratio, so we can keep social distancing and be safe.
All right, thanks, sir. And then, so this is, we'll continue ongoing training for the GEAR grant and to be able to help create rich experiences, environment, but at the same time protecting our children and our employees. Transportation and meals will be provided during this, and you may say that we still have more students to gain access. $4 million goes really fast when you're talking about employees, transportation, and meals. We're thankful for the money, but we are going to maximize the money as often as we can. So instruction will be diagnosed. We will have to diagnose using iReady platforms. We'll have a baseline assessment and the end of assessment of this period. So, and this will all be focused on making certain we give explicit instruction with the 5 areas of phonemic awareness. comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, you name it. And then we're going to be looking at the implementing the best, looking at the best standards and using the book list from the best standards, which are new standards outlining from the Department of Education. And that will be all inclusive model that I'll send the board in a very short time. We'll do a lot of communicating with our parents to email them, allow them to know about the accessibility. We pick up the phone, a call to make sure that their child hits the criteria to fill every seat that we can using this funding. And ESSER, this is additional money for elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding. This is relief funding related to what we've spent on COVID. And this is $54 million that will transition to our school district. This will be distributed to both charter and private schools as well, based on FTE interaction and number of students they have. And there's a 2-year window to be able to spend this money. And this money is all going to be linked about, we spent close to $25 million to date on COVID. And that's meals, transportation, instruction, digital platforms, technology. So this will be able to help compensate us for the money that we have spent, and then the money we will need to spend in order to address the digital divide and to help our children to continue to be successful in this work. That's it. I know it's long, it's comprehensive, but just want to now to interact with the board to talk about how we can improve this, what should it look like, and our team stands ready to have a professional conversation. And I appreciate your insight and your direction in order to get better.
Thank you, Superintendent Davis, for that thorough presentation. And we do have some questions and comments from board members. So here's, for the benefit of the board members who are virtually with us today, here's the lineup for questions in the queue. We have Ms. Gray, Mr. Kona, Ms. Perez, Dr. Hahn, Ms. Stewart, and then Ms. Schamberger. So we will start with Board Member Gray. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I also be guided, Madam Chair, with the amount of time per?
Thank you for bringing that up. So that was about an hour's worth of a presentation. So we have it. That's fine. I mean, it's an important presentation, but we board members, we have about another hour or so to ask questions and make comments. If we do need to extend it past 11, then we'll just need a consensus from the board to do so that we can continue our conversation. But if we could, since we have, I think every board member is going to make some comments and questions, if we could maybe limit our time to, let's start with 5 minutes. And Pablo, Mr. Penabal, if you could kind of time us out, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Davis. Very comprehensive and very critical decisions that have been given all of us. I just want two comments. I want to be sure I mention that I am guided by the CDC, and so were you, because the analogy is Model A goes with the highest risk, Model B the more risk, and Model C, which is totally the virtual, is the lowest risk, and I thank you for that. I think we all need a grounding as to what, because everything is so changing, a grounding of where our decisions come from, and so I have chosen the CDC. So if you'll just bear with me. The first comment I want to make on the face covering, excuse me. We have a great spike coming up, and I thank you for that July 1st survey again, because parents definitely are weighing in. My agreement with the CDC, face coverings should be worn by staff and students, particularly older students, as feasible and are most essential in times when physical distancing is difficult. And I am just reminded, as you have been a former teacher, and I know the board members have children, buses are one huge risk, right? And also cafeterias, also the locker rooms when we talk about sports. And those are considerations that I hope that you'll take seriously. Those are comments, and I'm going to give you a bullet full of questions, and I know we're going to ask you to answer swiftly. And I know also you've answered many of them. And I want to thank your staff too, because you all have worked so hard and diligent in keeping our students safe. Superintendent Davis, you're student-centered, and I know this to be true, and so does our board. But you're also teacher-centered. So when we talk about planning, we know that online, and I think the popular version of school choice will be B, possibly, unless we have more cases, which we probably will. But given the B is a good balance, will you be giving, and I know that Stephanie Baxter Jenkins, CTA, will weigh in, a planning period for teachers to not only have online time, but also, in front time. So if you can respond.
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, we're contractually required to make certain we provide time for planning for teachers, and they need that present time. So it will continue during that. If B is A or B or C, we will make certain they have significant time to plan. As relates to Plan B, if we ever had to transition to Plan B, they would get 2 days additional planning to upload and to interact. But every day they will have defined planning along the way to make certain that they have time to themselves to be able to regroup, to prepare for next classrooms, and to continue to plan whether it's independently or with their colleagues in order to continue to do great things for children. But yes, ma'am, we will have planning along the way in every model presented today, and it's to allow them to continue to provide that independent time for them and improve their craft along the way and be prepared.
Well, thank you, and that's very much appreciated. And you are going to do another survey, so that's a question I had. The implementation, I had gotten from Gretchen Saunders, a finance report, the Florida School Board Association, on how we're going to assess students this would be applicable to not only option A, but certainly option B. How do we measure, how do we assess the students' work in terms of, here we have virtual and here we have in front, and there's so many variables. Will we be giving perhaps a student participation grade? I'm just going into the concern that was shared by the Florida School Board Association as far as the grading. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, ma'am. One thing that I want to be clear is that teachers define their grading systems. They define. We can help make recommendations. But we want children to prove competence every single day in their classrooms. And, I expect children to participate and give best effort along the way, and we'll continue to coach and provide guidelines. But, we'll work with the teachers along the way to help them define their grading system. But we want to be very clear. Do they own that process, and that they are professionals, they're practitioners. They do a really nice job, and they will continue to deem what may be best for their children along the way. But we will have to continue to assess our children. We will define the time that's e-learning, the time that they will plan, that they will assess, that they will review information, and times of when they will be available, and help them along the way if they need help. Define what their grading processes may look like to better assist their children.
And I appreciate that you're letting the teachers have those decisions, because, as you know, former teacher, it's they know what's going on in their classroom. Another question I have is the the ELL and ESE. We know that the challenges are very, very great, and we know also that we have grant and related financial assistance. So, in sharing that, will we be prepared, with your permission, to gain more paras, and in the case of the ELL, more translators, because that is a huge problem or barrier.
Yes,
with
ma'am.
The e-learning.
Through the chair, if we have an influx of students that are students with disabilities or students with English language learners that elect and select the e-learning process, then we may have to put more money into those services. And we may have to redefine accessibility. Not only put more money for translators and for support professionals and potentially teachers, but we're going to have to give them the resources to be successful. Whether it be supplemental materials, whether it be computers to interact with, you name it. We're going to have to make certain that we address any divide that may exist due to this process. So once we get a better indication, hopefully by July 10th, that we can start interacting with that data from parents and their choice and what they select, then I can tell you that we would probably come back to the board to look at potential allocation increases based on that model, if there definitely is a desired need. We will do everything we can to better help and assist. We will follow every IEP 504 plan and ELL services to be successful, to help our children be successful along the way.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're highlighting those two categories, as sometimes they don't have the voice as strong as should be. I am concerned about the coaches and the uniforms that the children will wear, keeping that safe. As a coach myself, I know locker rooms and sweat and all the other associated visuals. So I don't think we need to comment on it, but I'll just share that that's always a concern. Won't go into my Jesuit stories either. Well, I'll do that later, using my time up. But the visitors, I know we have to be extremely careful. So the junior achievement, for example, will we be allowed, and those are student, as you mentioned, those will benefit our students' education, but will those, that program in particular, be carried forth?
Yes, ma'am. That program will be full-fledged. They've done a really nice job to create a multifaceted approach for delivery, whether that's going to be brick and mortar in schools or they do virtual tours. So they do a really nice job with Hillsborough County and other school districts as well. So that partnership will continue to be implemented, and we'll figure out proactive ways to get that content, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's 3D, and as much as we can virtually in front of our learners.
Well, yeah, and thank you. That's going to come up more than not. And I know I'm almost out of time. So when we have migrants, say in Trapnell and Turkey Creek and those areas, Dover, those schools are impacted greatly. And in fact, there was a spike in the migrant camp. This will be my last one. There was one 2 weeks ago, and I was at Turkey Creek with Frida Johnson. I know I shared this with you. So her response was, well, when they get into the school and there is a case, we can't really isolate because they don't have the room, the parameters. But the problem was with the migrant, because of the working hours, stretches sometimes to 6 hours, they can't get their children, pick them up, and there is a distinct challenge for that population, which is true in Waimama, true in Ruskin, in those schools. And I know Madam Chair understands that as well, since she's in that area and can appreciate it. So what have we done some thinking about how we're going to accommodate those specific problems for the migrant population? I don't know if you have a comment on that or not, but that's...
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, we can look into it. If there's a growing, need for us to do business differently for particular pockets of the community, we're open to doing so. We can have more conversations if need be with either me or staff to figure out what the growing need may be and how we can continue to help them be successful, not only inside the classroom, but out as well.
Okay. Well, thank you
Yes,
very
ma'am.
much. Again, what a great commitment and what a great rollout, each and every one of you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Gray. Thank you, Superintendent Davis. Next up, we have Mr. Kona.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was nice to take my mask off for a second. Mr. Superintendent and your team, this is a very thorough plan, and I appreciate all of the whole entire team's efforts to come up with these models for us to choose from. If you're asking for a consensus, I'll start, quite honestly, by saying I'm a fan of Model A. From what I've hearing from my constituents, I think Model A gives every single parent the option to choose what the best scenario is for their student. I appreciate the creativity of Model B, but I also think I don't think it's as simple as a plan, and I think it would be harder on my constituents in my district, especially our ELL and ESE students, giving them the opportunity to have a consistent plan. Whichever option they choose, I think it's good for the parent. I think the traditional option with the face-to-face interaction, I do have some concerns in that model. I do think that we need to have a defined criteria for what e-learning looks like. I think e-learning the last quarter of the year was something that was forced upon everyone. I'd like to see a little bit more robust structure as to what parents are signing up for if they choose that their child is going to go e-learning at their particular school. So I'd like to see something wrapped around that to ensure that it is going to be a viable solution, because I think some teachers really had the e-learning part figured out, and I think some were putting assignments on there. So I just don't want it to be, student logs in, does a couple of assignments, and I just don't think that delivery, unless we put something around it, is going to be successful. But I know that talking to Connor and his team, that's something, and obviously CTA has a lot to do with that as well. So working with them to put some parameters around e-learning, I think, would be beneficial. My other concern is, for a long time, the district, we've been inconsistent in the cleanliness of our schools. And I think during this time, and this is something that we've talked about on this dais even before predated COVID, but we need to ensure that we have proper procedures and standards across the district. I know that I've seen the inconsistencies in schools, but cleanliness is of the utmost importance during this time, and our schools, need to have some sort of standardization to ensure that that they are being cleaned every day during this process. Now, I do believe that option A, I'm just taking a guess, but you are going to have some parents go for the B and the C option, which is the e-learning and the virtual, which I'm just guessing, but maybe 20 to 30% of the parents choose those options, which means we're going to have less kids in the traditional school. So I'm interested to see if we were given the parents the expectation of what model you're going to go with. We'll actually see what those numbers look like, and I think that would be a great sign, and then we can plan accordingly. So while I appreciate what went on to come up with B, I think from a parent standpoint, I think it's a logistical nightmare, especially for my ELL parents and my ESE parents that have to work every single day. So I think that would be I'm glad that that's an option. I'm glad that we can pull the trigger on something like that if possible, and your team's done that. But for my folks, I think Model A gives us the right options, and I think that's, in my theory, the best way to kind of move forward and kind of gauge our stakeholders to see which, under the Model A, which option are the parents going to kind of settle into. And I think that will give us a good perspective. But that's all I have at this point. Oh, and I'd like to appreciate everyone who worked on the mask. I think providing masks to all of our students and our teachers, and as far as the PPE goes, I think it's awesome. And thanks for all the work, Chief. Thank you. And I know Mr. Farkas is working very hard on that as well. So kudos to that. But I think it's a great plan. Now we just need to figure out what option everybody wants. I mean, that's kind of what my thought is at this point. Sorry, I don't have any questions. You did a good job.
Thank you, Mr. Kona. Did you have anything you wanted to add to Mr. Kona's comments?
Through the chair, I appreciate Mr. Kona. Like I said, we just want to be multifaceted options, and I am intrigued too about what July 10th will bring for the survey results. And I want to be, and to your point, I agree about the facilities, and I want every principal, if they're watching today, if you ask for something to your facility to be addressed and it's not addressed, I want you to email me or call me, because the expectation is, and if you haven't done it, walk through Memorial Middle School. Walk in through the front doors and see what April expects in that front facility. And every school should mirror that same cleanliness. The expectations should be high, and in every pocket and every corner of our schools should be attractive for every learner. And it's clear for my staff what I expect. And and I wish Mr. Robinson was here today, but he's not. But we won't ask twice to get it done. So help us, help you. Let me know if there's issues, and because it's not going to be tolerated, and we've got to make certain we have facilities ready for our children every day. Sorry.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, we have Member Perez.
Thank you. Your presentation was very thorough, and options for the parents are amazing. But what I want to make a comment on is, when it comes to safety, when it comes to our children, safety matters. Be that their physical safety or emotional safety. We are living in unprecedented times when we have to decide on protecting our students against an unseen enemy that the entire world is battling. As we battle this enemy, COVID-19, we as leaders have to take into consideration many factors. We have students in our district who attend our schools and are part of our incredible district who have compromised autoimmune systems. These students suffer from diabetes, psoriasis, IBS, celiac disease, and that's just to name a few, and not to mention the countless students who suffer from asthma. These are students in Hillsborough County who are there are also students here who are residing in multi-generational households. This is where the grandparents reside in the homes with their adult children. And this could be due to the care that they require, families in need of aftercare for small children, or simply families wanting their children to be closer to their grandparents. And studies show that children who are diagnosed with COVID-19 did not show any symptoms. This means that a student in the care or living with a grandparent could unwittingly infect them. Even though the student isn't displaying a fever or cough, it is possible that children may shed the virus for longer than we as adults. I know I have many concerns regarding the availability for masks at this time. So, an additional solution, Superintendent, that I would like to see proposed is that the district look into the costs of face masks for the students who are unable to afford them, along with working with Hillsborough County on the widespread testing plan, since our students are in the schools, through the $54 million that Hillsborough County schools received under the CARES Act. Whatever plan our parents choose for their children, we are responsible for keeping all students safe and out of harm's way. Florida, our area in particular, continue to see high number of cases. In August, I would love to be celebrating our students returning to school and their engagement with their fellow students. As we all know, school provides an important piece of socialization, which is so vital for their mental health, wellness, and development. But we must understand that we have in our schools our most vulnerable students and other staff that we have to take into consideration when making our decisions. Our decisions cannot defeat the purpose of social distancing and masking, and it is simply not worth the risk. Our parents expect us to continue setting the standard for excellence in this district and our students' well-being. And we must stay focused on who the ones truly affected here are, and remember that our promise is to prepare our students for life. And putting the power of option in the hands of our parents is also empowering for both the parents and our students. So I really like your Model A, where they have that option for traditional and the option for e-learning. As I heard from my constituents, But, we also have to remember, if the parents choose to send their students to the traditional face-to-face, that it's incumbent on us to protect those students. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Perez. Did you want to talk again about the face masks that you're distributing to students?
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, I appreciate it, Ms. Perez. You're absolutely correct. Our job is to protect our little ones, and especially, those who may have conditions that are unforeseen. I have a young lady that is going in the 9th grade, has really bad asthma, and COVID, if she's exposed to it, she would have a really hard time. So I can relate. We've taken hopefully we'll hear back from FEMA related to the 1 million masks that they will give our school district very soon. We should know by today. Fingers crossed. But we're also going to, like I said before, purchase the 3 reusable masks along the way. So we'll continue to look at partnerships and look at funding. We can look at the CARES Act as well, and I had the conversation with Mr. Connor, Dr. Kemp, along with Mr. Farkas about potential using additional funds to do it, to be able to make certain they have sufficient masks along the way. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. All right, next we have Dr. Hahn.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't echoing.
It's a little low, Dr. Hahn. I don't know if there's a way we can.
Say it.
Oh, hold on. Sorry.
That's a little better. Yes. Thank you.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comprehensive plan. I know that what I'm most happy about is that there are options for families, whether it's in Plan A or as we move to Plan B. I guess 2 weeks ago, I would have been really confident with Plan A, given what's happened in the spike over the last week. The increase in patients that we're seeing across hospitals in Tampa Bay, it's alarming. So I'm very, very glad that parents will have options under Plan A. So I guess I'm going to jump right into my questions because I have quite a few, so I'm going to move quick. One is I'd like to address the digital divide. I know that when we closed the schools and we went into a strictly e-learning mode, that many of our families who typically don't have a lot of technology in their homes really struggled with digital literacy. And that obviously made students who are already some of our most vulnerable learners even more vulnerable around learning. So are we going to be providing to those families who are not so comfortable with technology any type of PD or training around using the technology for learning under the e-learning models?
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, we're going to launch the community family series, and it's community learning series, and that's going to be professional development for every one of our community members. In this process, one of the prongs will be how to help your child as a first educator with the e-learning process, and then we'll most likely do one if we had to go to option B, and then also for Hillsborough Virtual as well, so they know how to interact. We also know that sometimes digital may not be the greatest platform to implement, so we'll continue to have printed structures and use and align current or new curriculums to be able to give our children what they need to be successful as well from a literacy standpoint, whether that be additional novels, excerpts, or additional platforms, toolkits, and potentially ready laughs if approved, to be able to help them along the way, but to continue to help parents with that process.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer. Could you address safety for athletes under the two models?
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, it's going to be continued coaching and using guidance. I mean, we've as we launched on June the 15th for athletes to come back, it's been in a very controlled structure. However, that may look very different as we transition and go back through Model A and Model B. Both models will be models there where athletes and teams are going to have to function together. The issue is that we're just going to have to figure out, and we're going to have to get coaches on board. We're going to have to bring coaches in and get team members, athletic directors along the way, along with the health department, to define what the regulations may be. On a football field, we're kind of going to be okay because we have enough land to be able to spread out and to implement practice our plays, and we just won't have physical contact. Scrimmage will be limited, and that's going to be an issue as well. But looking at, if you give a cross country, if you look at softball and baseball, they're already a social distancing sport as well that has sufficient space, or with them. Swimming is also one of those. But it's more to a point of what Ms. Gray said. When you get to interactions, whether it's on the bus or in the locker room. It's going to be very complex and different. So maybe we have staggered times where children, when they come in and they dress out, staggered times when they're dismissed to come in to dress back in, and to be have very fluid, defined regulations. So that's a next step for us after this plan today is to go back and have a number of task force related to ESE, ELL, along with our athletic directors and coaches to really have a defined model to share with our community and share the board as well.
Thank you. So it's still a work in progress,
Yes,
and I like the idea of a task force, and I would encourage some diversity on that task force,
ma'am.
meaning, I heard you mention coaches, absolutely, but maybe some parents and also student athletes, because like you said, it's not just practicing on the field, it's also, these student athletes are training in the weightlifting rooms, and that's close proximity. So, as you move forward, I appreciate those conversations.
Yes, ma'am.
Keeping the pace going here. You and I spoke a little bit this week via email about the impact on FTE. Could you please just share that quickly with the rest of the board and community? Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. So through the chair, Dr. Hahn asked some great questions about how this overall modified model plan will impact FTE. FTE should remain the same. We shouldn't have any impact. The only impact that will be different is the number of classes and courses learners take in Hillsborough Virtual. So if you go to brick and mortar traditional, we'll get your full FTE. If you go to e-learning, you get to full FTE. But if you go Hillsborough Virtual, it's all based on the number of courses that you take, and FTE will be defined that. So if a learner comes and says they're only going to do half of Hillsborough Virtual, we only get half of those FTE point credit for that with funding models. But I try to be, sir.
Hillsborough Virtual, that platform requires a student to complete a course in order for us to get that.
So all that to say is that the FTE should stay intact, and versus the virtual, which they have full completion and enrollment of courses.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted the community and the board to hear that. And in regard to Hillsborough Virtual, this is to our community and my constituents. If that's the path you're choosing, it's the benefit of Hillsborough Virtual is that those are local teachers who understand our community, our students. It's the same curriculum, correct me if I'm wrong, as Florida Virtual, but it's just facilitated with local teachers.
Correct.
And the dollars stay in our public schools. So please, if you are choosing a virtual path and you want to continue to support our local public schools, choose Hillsborough Virtual. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Okay, so, sorry. So, I'm sorry. Just to clarify, the masks that you're giving to students, we were purchasing 3. FEMA was adding another 5 to that for each student, so that's a total of 8.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. The 3 that we are going to be reusable. The 5 are, I believe, are going to be the reusable as well from FEMA if approved.
So are we supplying those weekly, monthly? When you say reusable, typically, depending on the mask, it's about a 3-day reusable period. So what is the frequency of the masks being delivered to students?
So through the chair, there's two ways. We can just, give it all to the students and parents, or we can have staggered approach and host them at the school. When they lose them, they can come back to us. The issue is that if we give them all at once, they may lose them in the first 5 minutes, and we'll be out of mask. And but we potentially will probably host them, give them 2 to start off with, the cover to 5 days, and if they lose them, they get a chance to come back to re-up, so that we can hold them and they can continually have them accessible at our school, so they don't lose them at home. I know I walk around this weekend I was needed a mask and I grabbed my daughter's. We just don't want that to happen, so we
Right.
can control it at school. Would be better.
And how are we going to be disposing of masks on campus? Because they are going to be considered hazardous materials, much like in hospitals and doctors' offices. We have red bags.
Good point.
How do we do that at schools?
Yeah.
And how do we mark them as hazardous waste
Sure.
versus just regular waste?
So through the chair, it's a really great question. So we'll work through Tracy Brown and the health department to help and define that, though, and present guidelines to every one of our school leaders and school nurses to take in staff, so that we are prepared for that intake.
And the daily temperature takes that you mentioned under the plans, is that going to be done at school, or did you say that was just temperatures taken at home? And if it's done at school, what does the process look like for that?
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, related to in Model A, it's self-check. We provide guidelines for parents to do self-checks with their learners, and also with employees to do self-checks. And that's just making certain that if they have symptoms, don't feel good, take temperatures at home, be mindful. But if it relates to coming to our school, it's no different than what we're doing at Rosac and every one of our district facilities. We'll have a defined personnel that sits outside that has no potential contact no physical contact with our employees, that's going to take their temperatures. And temperature, anything that's over 100.4, that's defined as a fever, then we will give them guidelines of how to go seek immediate services, and to help them connect them with a provider or the Department of Health. And then we will need additional information back once they have clearance, to make certain that they are over and prepared to return back. But openly, anyone that has above a 100.4 as an employee, we're just not going to let them in our facilities.
So I would
If we get
imagine
to
you're
that.
going to have to. I would imagine under that condition, you're going to have to think through how you're going to scan each student as they walk through the door without creating a gaggle of students now really close to each other. So you don't have to get into that, but I'd imagine that's something you have to think through. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. And we are at this stage, and we're not going to do temperature checks on students. It would be like you just said. It would be like TSA. The line would be out the doors, and
Right.
it would eat up instructional time tremendously. Hence,
Exactly.
yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Dr. Hahn, if we could, we have
Yeah,
gone
one
past
more
your
question.
time.
Okay.
Do you have? Is it okay if I put you back in the queue?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be able to give each board member enough time.
No, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn. Okay, next we have Cindy Stewart.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So first of all, Superintendent, thank you and your team for. I know that this has been an undaunting task to not only get us through the last 9 weeks, and then figure out how we're going to even talk about or approach opening for August. I know that you guys this has been fluid. I know we've had to be flexible since March 14th, and I think we'll continue to have to show that flexibility both for our students, for student safety, and for the community, and how we make sure that we're providing what the community needs as far as information. I know right now we probably have more viewers on this board workshop than we've ever had before, because this is the number one question that people have been asking, as how are we planning to reopen schools. So I want to thank you and the team for the work that you've been doing. I know it's always been, for me, it's always been let's plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I think that's where we are. I think we need to continue to remain fluid and flexible as we move forward. I think that the spike that we're seeing right now may or may not change our plans, and I think we're just going to have to be mindful of that. And I don't want to pepper you with a bunch of questions. I just have some comments because I know this plan will probably change 10 times between now and August 10th if we get to August 10th. And I hope that, you know, we get weekly or very regular updates from you on the things that are changing as we see changes from both the county and city government on how and what is required for masking and social distancing and what the CDC guidelines state. I believe they're coming out with new guidelines next week. So as we continue to move through that, I would just hope that you would keep us, I'm sure you will keep us informed. I'd also just like to offer, you know, we do have some stuff that is happening in the district. And so I'm hoping that your teams are watching. You know, VPK opened on Monday. And so we have schools that are open that have students in them. We have, you know, kids being dropped off at sites. I know it's limited and I know the numbers are small, but we certainly could be watching, you know, how that, you know, and learn from how that process is going. Also with summer and summer rise happening, I think we'll learn from that too, how students are feeling, how parents are feeling, how comfortable they are with bringing their kids back, and what that looks like. I'm really grateful for the work that we've done around providing masks for students and staff. I know that has been a huge question, but there are there's a lot of other questions. You know, how do students keep track of masks? Are they going to put their names on them? You know, what does that look like? If, you know, Johnny takes his mask off to speak to the teacher and then has to put it back on, what do we do with students that are incompliant? You know, those kind of questions. Again, I know these are all things that the task force and your team will continue to have to work through. But as far as, you know, there's questions just for you to put in, make note of and to work through later. You know, substitute teachers, what do we do when a teacher is out sick? How are we going to handle that? You know, how are we going to handle visitors on our campuses? There are some schools, a lot of schools operate with a lot of volunteer help. You know, what does that look like when we are not or can't allow volunteers on our campuses, even including off-site third-party vendors, and how are they getting on campuses and what does that look like? So this is not just about students, but all these other people who interact with our students while they're on campuses. And then I want to broach the subject of choice and Hillsborough Virtual. I know the choice window has been opened and then closed, and so we may have students who don't fill those slots, and I want you and your team to be mindful of how we approach that topic. And then charters. You know, our charters operate in a very different, they're under our purview, but they really are not under our guidance, and so they operate a little bit differently. And I'm concerned that we will have a district that is running in one particular manner and 52 charters who may choose to do something else, and how we manage that and what that looks like. And I know some of the charters were included in our survey and some were not because they did their own surveying, and I think that was a little confusing to our parents. And I'm glad to hear that you're going to resurvey. I think that it's important for people to make a decision about, so that we can plan what they're planning for their child. So if you're going to choose a blended model, I think we need to know that, especially for assignment of teachers who are going to do e-learning versus in the classroom. I know that's a question I asked Mr. McCauley already. Are teachers going to have an option to do one or the other, or are they going to do both? And how is that going to look? Again, a lot of questions. Student safety being at the top of that list, and how we provide for the best environment for students to learn. I'm really hoping the spike doesn't last long and that we get through this quickly and can really seriously talk about looking at an August 10th opening date. But I don't know if you have considered, as you move forward, potential other dates, waiting until after Labor Day to open potentially, or if that's something that the team is even talking about. But I would hope that we are considering all options when we look at stuff like that. Those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Stewart. And Mr. Superintendent, did you have anything you'd like to respond to?
Through the chair, very good points. Ms. Stewart, as always, define guidelines for distributing, labeling, looking at sub-volunteers, third party, all those will have to be addressed within our plan. So definitely we'll definitely incorporate those and appreciate the feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. All right, Ms. Schamberger?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, I apologize for no video this morning, but you'll thank me later. Hopefully I'll be able to get myself together for the 4 p.m. meeting. First of all, thank you so much, Superintendent, for the presentation. Certainly a lot of information and a lot of information to unpack. We know that our families and our staff are really concerned about one thing, which is come August, how will they all be safe? And so I certainly have my personal opinions as to which model is best, but I think this is a decision that has to be led by our families and our staff. And so one thing I will say, though, is that we know that come August, it can't be business as usual during these very unusual times. As an elected official, by now most people know that I am battling COVID. I literally put my life on the line for the community. But when it comes to education, certainly our families, our students, and our staff members don't have that same obligation. And so it's important that we make sure that everyone is absolutely safe. So when it comes to masks, first of all, thank you so much for what you're doing, getting masks from FEMA and also providing some reusable masks for our students. I will say that masks should absolutely be required. I was one of those ones who took it for granted, and here I find myself today, quarantined, battling this crazy virus. And so we definitely want to make sure that we can continue education without having to shut back down. And if we can mitigate or minimize that by making sure every student and staff are required to have masks, I certainly would support that and highly encourage it. So most of what I had has already been discussed, but let me just say a couple of things. One, regarding the survey, I think the survey responses last time were very low. I just hope that we could make sure that it is pushed out further and more adequately this time, maybe even engaging our schools to ensure that their folks are responding so we can get a more complete picture. It's important that our staff, especially our teachers and our families, and the students have complete say in what this will look like moving forward. Mr. Superintendent, I also want to make sure, and I know that you will make sure that there's strict accountability when it comes to the cleanliness and sanitizing of our schools moving forward. This is something we absolutely cannot play around with. But lastly, I have one question that I don't believe has been asked, which is, Mr. Superintendent, how are you engaging health experts and even our HVAC experts around the decisions moving forward to reopen our schools? And I say HVAC, how does the spread of the virus flow through our buildings, and what are our experts saying in terms of mitigating or minimizing the impact on students and staff in terms of PPE and things like that?
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, thank you, Ms. Schamberger, and I agree that conversations need to continue to happen. I know that we had some initial conversations with the Department of Health. The Department of Health was looking at some of our plans as late as last evening and having more conversations. And then I will, looking at how the airflow will be. I know we'll have constant conversations through our staff. I'm going to refer to Mr. Farkas related to the impact on the HVAC. What does that do for us as an organization? Because you're right, airflow starts to get through the building, and what does safety and security lend a hand in order to better support it? But it's a good question.
Thank you, Superintendent. The reality is we have no negative flow buildings, which means all our buildings are connected. That's a huge problem for us when it comes to airborne illnesses and airborne viruses. One of the positives is Mr. Culpepper and the safety team have a fog that allows us we can turn off the AC, but even if we don't turn off the AC, within 24 hours to do the whole system and make sure that we have a clean environment. We have no lacking, excuse me, no lacking for number of vendors that can help us in that situation. There's a lot of people that have the silver bullet. We believe that is constantly evolving. We don't want to spend money when we're not sure that that's the actual absolute answer. So we're going to continue to be in contact with Dr. Kemp and the superintendent to ensure that we provide a safe environment. But there's a lot of vendors out there that have a lot of good ideas on that. Right now, we're going to stay true with our tried and true, but have our ears open, our eyes open to what those possibilities are.
Thank you, Mr. Farkas. And to Ms. Schamberger, to your point, we'll make certain that we link with practitioners internally and externally to look at if any additional proactive steps need to be taken related to the AC flow impact, filters, those types of things. And it sounds to your point that we may have to have an increase of revolving door filters to be able to further protect.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Ms. Schamberger, did you have any other questions or comments?
That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to slide in here before we go back to Ms. Gray and Dr. Hahn, and we are running a little short on time. We have about 10 minutes, so after my comments, perhaps we can decide whether we want to extend this workshop a little bit longer. But a lot of my comments and some of my concerns have already been addressed through the other board members. So thank you for asking those questions, posing those questions, making those comments and recommendations, all of which are very good. As you know, we've, as your board members have been hearing from parents and teachers and with obviously very many concerns, which you have addressed many of them here, and I know that you'll continue to keep us updated and communicate some of the concerns that still need to be addressed. And I want to thank you and your entire team for continuing to listen to the stakeholders in our school district and to continue to keep those lines of communication open. At this juncture, I don't think there is such thing as over-communicating when it comes to being in a pandemic and trying to figure out how we're going to safely reopen schools and teach our students. I appreciate the fact that we are going to maintain flexibility with this plan as well as adapt to family needs. And I'm glad that you brought that up, Ms. Gray, about some of our marginalized students in different parts of our county. I'm concerned that we may have had several students, kind of slip through the cracks during the distance learning segment of our last 9 weeks in Hillsborough County. And I just want to make sure that if we move towards a model that gives that as another option, that, we're definitely making sure that we're accessible and the students and families who may not have access to the resources are still able to engage in instruction with our school and be, in constant contact with our schools. I just don't want any kids slipping through the cracks. Unfortunately, that I don't know if that happened, but I just certainly want to make sure that doesn't happen. And then I do like the traditional Model A option. I think that that's going to be the best option. Hearing from my constituents, that my families and students and teachers, many of them are very anxious to get back into a traditional learning environment. But as you can see from the survey, there are several that are not comfortable yet, and so giving them as many options as possible. That's the beauty of this county, the school district, the state and country, is being able to have choices, right? And that's really what it's about, making sure that parents have choices for their students, because distance learning may have really worked well for some students, but maybe not for every student and every family. And having 3 distance learners at home myself, I had a variety of experiences with each student. They adapted differently to distance learning. So, and then the sanitation concerns, those I think are one of the things that parents reached out to me. We had some concerns last year before the pandemic that there was not enough soap and there was not enough supplies at each school. That was the biggest complaint I think that I got from my constituents was, well, you're telling us to wash our hands and be safe, or the kids to wash their hands, but there's no soap in the bathroom and there's no supplies. And so I want to address that. You don't have to necessarily comment on that, but I just want to let you know that that's the feedback that I got. And I don't know if that's how actual that is, but the perception was that many schools lacked the sanitation supplies to keep the students safe during the day. And then I'm glad to see that you are expanding Hillsborough Virtual. I think that's a fantastic opportunity for our school district. I am a little disappointed that we don't get the full FTE dollars for Hillsborough Virtual virtual, especially until they actually complete the class. So I guess it's possible that they register, and if they don't complete, then we get nothing for that time that has been spent educating that particular student. But I appreciate you focusing on that as an opportunity for us to have a different way to educate our students, a different way for teachers to still be employed in the school district through the virtual program, and also for us to have some revenue come into the school district and that we may have not had before. So thank you very much for the thorough plan. I look forward to continuing hearing your updates and recommendations and see how this plan continues to really morph until school begins, which may or may not be in August. So thanks. All right, then moving on, we have a couple more board members that would like to speak. And board members, before we do that, do we have consensus that we can extend this workshop a little bit longer? It's about 5 until 11, so we can go till probably 11, up to 11:30. 11:15, 11:30 at the latest, maybe? Okay, just want to respect your time. I know you all are very busy with other appointments and constituents to respond to. So with that, we'll go ahead and extend to at least 11:30. And we have Ms. Gray up next in the queue. Ms. Gray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for edification, what you shared about the migrants, and just so it's out there, there's over 70,000 families in the Waimama area. So they do count in in terms of addressing the student population. I just want to just briefly say, ideally, for the record, since everyone is making mention, ideally we would love to have Model A, right? Because that's the original instruction. But I'm also saying that the virus will dictate which model we have. That's my statement, not perhaps us, but the virus. So we will have to be fluid, and I just want to say a very heartfelt appreciation that each of you are very fluid and you're flexible, and we need to be, and our board too. Thank you, every one of the board members. Masks, it is recommended there are cloth masks for many reasons. They could be reused, washed, etc. The CDC recommends cloth masks, but what I wanted to share is that some schools are doing their own thing with masks. Let me give you an example. Shields Middle School, they're giving a plastic mask covering. I don't know if you've seen them or not. Some of the hairstylists have it, and they're checking it out to each student, and then the student is responsible for that, and they had not a grant, but some kind of contribution. But there are schools that have, or just elementary, right? He's got a contest with the mask and their messages on the mask. So there might be a lot more fun involved here than some of our sad responses or worried responses. Looking at the bright side as much as possible. There is a social emotional component, very big time, and I know that this is addressed in here. I want to also just share the concern. Not only is the COVID virus, but the racial unrest. As I shared with you this morning, we have a tremendous amount of anxiety. The higher suicide rate is occurring among our African Americans. There is trauma, and as we know at home, if you're home all day with kids, sometimes domestic violence happens more. And then when you don't have a teacher looking at the students for the signs, they go undetected. But I didn't want to forget the racial unrest, because that is effectively going to affect our students. And that mental health component, I think, needs to be up there in the priority list. Custodians, going around to schools, and the optimal would be, and definitely we want those schools to be cleaned and all the hygienic recommendations. The reality is sometimes the custodians, one might be on vacation, another one in another school might be sick. So sometimes there's a staffing issue. For instance, at Dover, there should be 4 full-time, but there's only 3 because one's on vacation. And all this is to ask Superintendent Davis, when we put on a priority, which we are, of sanitary conditions at all can we not be very careful that lapse of a custodian does not occur. Can you remark on that? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, to the chair. And is that my buzzer already?
Is that my, that's probably my buzzer.
Well, the first comments you talked about, the mask could be fun. I mean, there's creative ways, especially in the elementary side of it. And you said something about hairdresser. You can tell I don't do it. I'm not connected to a hairdresser, but related to yes, ma'am, related to custodial staff. I mean, let's be open. Some of these are hard to fill positions, and it's about compensation and attractiveness through that work. And we'll do as much as we can and work with Iran and his team and Mr. Warren, and also I'm a great confidence in Ben Moore to help with drive that work through Mr. Farkas. And but I believe that through Mrs. Snively's point about potentially soap or paper towels not being in common areas or in restrooms, it's about making certain that we have a defined rotational model, this continued cycle to be checked continuously. And to your point, there may be a custodial staff member down, which may cut on that cycle. So we just got to redefine how that looks. We've got to do a better job having, if someone calls out, having someone that's, whether it's additional individuals that are in a pool at the district level that we can send to a school to better assist, whether that's done geographically, and to better make certain that our schools are taken care of. So it's all boils down to doing a better job to have an attractive pay for custodial staff, making sure we're defining systems in our schools about touch points, about how often we focus on cleaning and prioritizing particular spots and locations of every pocket of the school. What are we going to do for a rotation model for our restrooms to make sure they have the necessary materials to be clean at all times for our learners, and for us to make certain that we have a pool of additional allocations that may be able to help our schools in doing so.
Thank you. And I believe my time is up. Seems like it went awfully fast. Do I have time for one more?
Well,
You can just say no.
I think we do, actually, because it's just after 11. So, yes, if you want to have one more question. And then in the queue, I'll just let you know, we have Dr. Hahn, Ms. Schamberger, Cindy Stewart, and Mr. Kona.
So real quick, the vents and the filters, yes, indeed. We know if we're on an airplane, what do we look at? You know, how that air is blowing. And Farkas, Mr. Farkas, you know all too well that many of our buildings are as old as heck. And those filters, they are dirty. I mean, we can look at them. So I do think that is a priority because that lends itself to spread. And I hate to be that picky, but you know what? Sanitary conditions must be upheld, especially now. I wanted to say one thing, too. I don't doubt the fidelity from this staff of yours, Superintendent Davis, that they can handle scenario A, scenario B with great efficacy. I don't doubt that. So when there's remarks about, oh, well, I think A is better than B because B might be more complicated, I don't buy into that. I do truly believe that you and your team are fully capable of communicating and doing whatever it takes to make it successful. And if, sadly, we have to go to Plan B. But I wanted to remark on that, and there's nothing more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Appreciate your comments. All right, next we have Dr. Hahn.
Thank you. I have two quick questions. One is around teachers. If teachers get sick with COVID or their child gets sick, God forbid, in either instance, what that could mean that they have to take quite a bit more time off than they have acquired through, HR. How are we going to be supporting those teachers in those circumstances?
Yes, ma'am, to the chair. I believe that the current act that's in place, it may not, and I'm going to go to Dr. Whalen on this. I don't know if it's extended through August and through the school year, but it will create a divide. One thing we will do, if we have teachers that are on site that have to go out for a quarantine of 14 days, regardless if it's a close family member or themselves, we will have instructional coaches and district coaches as well that we may have to put in that particular classroom, so we do not create a long-standing time that we do not have a qualified teacher in front of our students. While we know that subs do a really good job, and there are some retired teachers that are in that place that help us with that, and we're thankful. We just have to work coordinated with HR and also the CTA to be able to make certain that we do not miss a beat instructionally. But I know you're going to financially. Sorry. Is that right?
No, I mean, I'm more concerned about teachers being penalized. I don't want them penalized for having to take extended periods of time off.
Yeah, that's fine.
At this current time, the coverage for the Families First Corona Response Act is extended through December 31st. And so we've been updating those things, and we continue to monitor that. There are very strict parameters and what the qualifications are, but we've continued to update that since that first initially came out in March for us.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And then real quickly, this question is about the GEAR grant. And you did mention that $5 million does go really quickly. So are we also funding a piece of that through our budget, or is the grant going to cover the whole entire cost?
Through the chair, right now, the grant's going to cover the entire cost. If we believe and deem that after having additional conversations with leaders that we need to expand, then we will have an additional cost under our umbrella. But we could potentially use some ESSER funding to be able to cover that with that $54 million, knowing that knowing that some of that's going to private schools, charter schools, and to us as well. But right now, the GEAR grant will cover the implementation of the July boot camp, I would say, literacy boot camp that will be extended in the Transformation Network.
Okay, and if, God forbid, we go under another, complete lockdown during that boot camp, does that program just end? Because it does say it has to be, the grant does specifically say in-person instruction.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair, that it would end. We would push, though, aggressively as superintendents to the Department of Education, try to get that funded and released in a different manner to be able to use it to address the achievement gap, meaning that whether we hire additional, extend the date to hire additional interventionists to work in schools, whether we continue to expand robust academic programs after school, before school, after school, and potentially on Saturdays to be able to address our learners.
And then under that grant, the teachers are going to use explicit systematic instruction for reading, which is great, and progress monitoring. Is the progress monitoring iReady? Is that what I heard? I just want to confirm.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair, and I'll let Mr. Connor.
Okay, you said yes, so I'm going to move on because we're short on time. And then is there going to be any professional development for teachers around explicit systematic instruction?
Yes, ma'am.
So the teachers that you hire are going to have some PD before they start teaching in this program, because that's a very specific way to teach that not all teachers, through whatever training they have gone through, may have had that experience. So I just want to, unless we're using some kind of curriculum where it's all done for them.
Go ahead. Through the chair. Go ahead, Mr. Connor.
Through the chair, we will be, on July 9th, we will be providing that explicit training to teachers prior to the 13th so that they can execute that instruction.
Okay, thank you. And just my last request to the chair would be, and I'll put it formally in a workshop request because we don't have time today, is everything that we have talked about, everything that we have done over the summer, to support our students. And I really want a workshop on the impact on our budget, because we are spending money, and an awful lot of it, in ways that we've never spent it before. And I am really concerned about how this is impacting other areas of our budget. But that might be a good workshop. And also, one last comment, I know in our elementary schools and even in some of our secondary labs, there's a lot of shared materials. And so I would hope that we're considering increasing resources to make sure that we have more materials across our elementary school classrooms that they don't have to share. as well as in our labs in our secondary and middle school classrooms. So thank you to the superintendent and his staff for the presentation today and for the extra time for comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn. All right, next up we have Ms. Schamberger.
Thank you so much. Just a real quick question. In terms of engaging our health experts, Mr. Superintendent, can you bring back any information to the board regarding the long-term effects of wearing masks by students or teachers and staff, and how, again, just the long-term impact of that?
Yes, ma'am, to the chair. That's one of my notes, is to make sure that if we looked at the overall implications, positive or all implications of wearing masks, and what does that look like for us as practitioners. While I do believe it's a best practice to be implemented, the issue becomes from a practitioner standpoint. When if we give a child a mask and they lose it, and we give them another mask and they decide not to wear it, are we going to be spending a significant amount of time dealing with issues, implementation issues around behaviors versus being able to focus on the instructional side of the work? And then the question becomes, if we say we're going to make certain and mandate you wear a mask, and if they don't, are we now discipline students because of a choice that their parent may have made versus the choice or they have individually made in the work? So I'll get a breakdown for all of that, and I think it's a good question.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Ms. Schamberger, did you have any other questions or comments?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next we have Ms. Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of things. I just want to make sure I'm having people who are questioning the live streams that are happening. Is this also going to be on our website like it normally is for people to rewatch later?
I think we'll defer to our communications for that, and I'm getting a thumbs up that it will be available to watch later for those who are not able to watch it live.
There are certain sections that people want to go back and look at, and then with that, can we make the slides available online as well that were presented? And I've already communicated with Mr. McCauley, but is there a way that we can start a frequently asked questions page through communications to start answering some of the issues? My phone, I know, is blowing up with people asking questions, and I'm gonna make my questions through Mr. McCauley and the superintendent available. But I want to make sure there's a path in which people can respond to what's been put out, especially our principals. I know a lot of what I heard yesterday and the day before from some principals were, we don't really know how to respond because we haven't seen anything yet. And so now that they've seen something, I think there's going to be a response and there's going to be questions. So I just want to make sure there's an avenue in which they're actually going to have an opportunity to respond to some of that stuff. So those were my only comments. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, to the chair. I have the same frustrations about not being able to, I've been here since March the 2nd and have yet to be able to get in front of principals. I've done it through a couple of Zoom meetings, and so I understand frustrations as well. Today's a 30,000-foot perspective. Principals will be actively engaged. They've started this morning, will be actively engaged in small groups. A communication was sent to them last night about how to begin to look at the formation and the design of all of this work. So they'll be active partners in this work, and we need them to continue to do great things for children.
Great, I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And finally, we have Mr. Kona.
And just for a little bit more clarification on the e-learning option, if we could, before we send out a survey to parents, for them to make a clear choice, I would like to see the survey have a detail as to what e-learning looks like, because I think I think that's important, especially when we're trying to get the feedback as to what option, because I think e-learning is going to be a different idea for every parent. So let's clearly spell out what that means for that parent, so that when they look at all three options, they can actually make a decision to with some confidence that that's the direction they want to go. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Kona. Mr. Porter?
Briefly to Mr. Kona's point, I think it's a very good point, and I think there is a distinction between e-learning and Hillsborough Virtual, and making sure parents understand that there are three distinct options under option A. brick and mortar e-learning, which is tied to the school, in Hillsborough Virtual. And I think parents need to understand that there's a difference, because those terms are used interchangeably, but they're terms of art and they have meaning. And I think for parents to have a full opportunity to make a choice, they need to understand what the three distinct meanings are. So I thought that was a good point to make, and I think the staff is already working on making sure that's clear.
Yes, very, very good points. So at this point in time, there are no other comments or questions from our board members. I think that you probably have heard quite a few things that I know that you'll need to go back and work with your team to respond to. I know that they're taking copious notes throughout this entire workshop, which is very much appreciated, and I see that you've already started your frequently asked questions page here at the dais. So we are looking forward to circling back and hearing more about your plan and addressing some of the things that were brought up in the discussion today. Board members, I think that if you have questions that you're getting from your constituents or stakeholders that are consistent, that maybe you share those questions with the superintendent directly in an email or by a phone call, so that he can include those in his frequently asked questions page for stakeholders. And so with that, there's probably an opportunity in the near future for us to either at a board meeting or another workshop setting for you to come back and address some of the things that we talked about today. So we'll work together to figure out what that's going to look like, so that you have the opportunity to to address those things. So with that, it is a little bit after 11:15, and if there are no further comments or questions for the superintendent, thank you so much again for presenting this plan, highly anticipated plan today. Thank you also for working with the communications division in order to make this broadcast through several different outlets, so that we could get maximum viewership today. And thank you again for communicating, keeping the lines of communication open with not just the board, but with the entire community. Congratulations again on your superintendentship. Welcome to Hillsborough County. All right, with that, we will now adjourn this workshop. Thank you, everyone.